Hello. I have 4 really good Aussie reads for you in this roundup. Very different, but every single one of them is if you like, it's a winner in its own genre. We'll start with the most recent one I put down, which is Dervla McTiernan's What Happened to Nina, coming to us from HarperCollins. And I think it's her best yet, set in Vermont. It is one of those books that if you start it, you'd better be prepared for going without sleep until you finished it. And I'm not saying that the book is so terrifying you can't sleep. I'm just saying that until you finish the thing, it doesn't let you go. Its claws are in from page 1. It's absolutely stunning. I had an absolute ball reading it. Basically, it's a Romeo and Juliet sort of story where we've got, do I really mean that? Probably not. We have a pair of young sweethearts who've been sweethearts for a long time, Nina and Simon. And this whole story is this kind of clash of family. Nina is the daughter of Lee, Leanne and Andy. Andy's not her real father, but is, and that's a really solid relationship, Leanne and Andy. And there's a younger sister, Grace, who is the daughter of both. So Nina's Leanne's daughter only. Not that this is incredibly relevant, because that's the whole point of the story, is it's about parenting. And Andy is her father, in all ways, but biological. And in the other family, Simon's family, Nina's mum has kind of dragged herself up from her bootstraps, perhaps a bit tough on the kids. They're doers. She runs a bed and breakfast sort of accommodation, and there's a kind of toughness in there. And Simon's family, wealthy, business. He's very much the father. Rory is very much, I'm about my profile and high-flying and lots of business savviness going on, great wealth. And the wife is sort of well aware that she might be trophy wife material, that she's kind of edging out of her, am I young enough and glamorous enough for him? And there are all of these tensions on. And Simon is their only son. These two, that were in Vermont, these two, Nina and Simon, go off for a weekend. They're in their first years of uni. They've been at school together, and they're both mountain climbers and hikers. And they go to his family's recently acquired property where there are great hiking trails, bought for, and only he comes back. And he has a story about that. And are we going to believe that? And what did actually happen? But this is the thing that McTiernan does. It's not just that it's super pacey and there's lots of exciting stuff happening and who is everybody and what's the detective's take. McTiernan gives you the different viewpoints, always does that very well, but she's always got something else to say. And in this one, it's about how social media works, how trolling works, how if you're rich and powerful, you can use the tools out there to defend yourself because you feel you have to. And we have these two families who are doing everything in their power to protect their children. What lengths will you go to? Don't be surprised if once you start it, you are oblivious to the rest of the world, because that's what McTiernan is doing. An absolute cracker. Next one up is My Brilliant Sister by Amy Brown. Comes to us from Simon & Schuster, and this is a debut. And what a debut. You get it from the title a bit that this is My Brilliant, we're talking Miles Franklin, Stella. We're talking about that. We're talking about her, but because it's My Brilliant Sister, we're actually focusing more. This is what Brown wants us to look at. Linda, the sister, the other Franklin girl. And this is, it's a look at what are the choices you make and how far does your personality inform those choices. So if you're like Stella, and we get a whole story of Stella from Linda's perspective, and it's not historically what we know, it is what Amy Brown thinks. Imagine if Linda was just a little bit sort of tired and sort of grouchy with her sister and said, I made a choice. I was the one who kept the peace. I was the one who got married. And I was the one who had the child. And unfortunately, I was the one who got overwhelmed by pneumonia and died when I was 25. But imagine if it hadn't gone like that. Imagine if I did have the brain. And maybe I did have the brain as Linda. So it's a kind of hilarious reckoning, which never happened, from Linda's point of view, how she viewed all her options and her choices. And apart from this central sort of, the voice in this is exceptional. Her way of talking as Linda is a riot. But there's something very true. I've thought that was excellent depiction of a very clever woman kind of squished into the corset of expectation, which Stella didn't. And then the book actually starts with the two contemporary, because we're in this realm of what if, imagine if it had all been different. And it's giving another sort of incarnation to Linda. We call her Ida. So we're sort of shifting it a little bit. And it also becomes a little bit possibly autofiction with probably our author talking a little bit of her experiences as these are the choices that women are faced with all the time. If I want to be a writer and maybe the husband in Ida's story is also a writer, but his work is privileged. So you've got a kind of a wifedom thing going on here. Why does she have to submit to him being the one who dictates everything? And why is she the one who's left with all the childcare? And then when she gets sick because we're in COVID, how does he take over? And how do they find each other in this? How does it become a kind of a compromise or a mutual recognition of each other's creativity? I thought that was exceptionally well done. And at the very end, we have this other Stella, and she is a songwriter and she has fractious relationships with lots of people, and some, sort of love affairs that kind of go skew with. You can feel the rebellion, you can feel the unsettledness, and she's of course locked in away from her home because of, again, COVID. And you sort of get this feeling at the end that these two women, that there's kind of what Brown is saying is maybe are these, is any of these a complete woman? And this is what she's looking at. What's her idea of a complete woman? It's terribly clever, terribly clever. An absolute stunner for a book club. So greatly enjoyed that one. The next one up is Myfanwy Jones' Cool Water, which comes to us from Hachette. And that's another great book club read. It's not a debut. She's already written one book called Leap, which was also longlisted, but I can't remember for which award. I'm dreadful. Very, very interesting book, this Cool Water. Set in Queensland, near the, in a real place called Tinaroo, where there was a dam. We're set over 3 generations and we're looking at men mostly. We have a family of Herberts. So when we start in the 1950s, we have the local butcher. He's kind of very dashing, Cary Grant style, lots of charisma, very aware of his effect on women. He's married, he's got 3 sons. And you sense this kind of brooding violence, but it's not a kind of repressed rage at what life has doled out to him. And he has plans. He's planned to get a claim for tobacco growing, and he wants to better himself. And he's kind of got a not a tropey, mousy wife, but you can tell that he's kind of beaten her down, and having 3 kids has beaten her down, and she probably isn't as glamorous and lovely as she once was, because she simply doesn't have time. So we're in that kind of, these are the cultural expectations. This is what happens to you when you get married. Because we're in the 50s, and it's a very good depiction of that. And into this community, we also have this Evelyn Edwards, who has come up from, she's not a blow, and she's come in as the wife of the chief engineer of the dam project. So it's thriving. There's people there, there's business going on, there's a lot of activity. And She's, she's a fish out of water, even though she's trying her best to fit in, because there's a sort of etherealness to her. She lives quite a lot in her brain. She's very kind, but there's artiness, you know, there's all of these fibres in her. She's sensitive. And her husband is obviously very well born, you know, has of her same social standing, and you're not sure that he's completely understood his wife. And people make what they will of her, but she comes across the youngest Herbert's son called Joe, who's a sensitive, lovely boy, and he delivers the local newspaper, and lots of things are in that. The local rag, there's a lot of stuff in there that really gets people's blood boiling. And what is to happen? And how will Joe come out of this sort of relationship? He kind of fancies her, but he's quite young, and he's not the only one. And how does he get involved in the dramas that will happen? And then later you come to a contemporary timeline where we have one of Joe's son, who didn't take over the butcher business and is striking out with another ambitious. We have this father ambition, and he's marrying his daughter, and lots of things will come to the fore because they've come back to this place, Tinaroo, and they've got to look at what their story is. And there are people who come to the wedding who have versions. And it's an absolutely stunning exploration of what men pass on to their sons and how ambition can get thwarted. And what does that do to you? And how is becoming nice so dependent on good luck? Found it absolutely riveting. And again, as a book club read, you won't stop talking. An absolute stunner. And the last one, which we now know is longlisted for the Stella, is Melissa Lucashenko's Edenglassie, which comes to us from the University of Queensland Press. Now, I've spent a while thinking about this book because with Lucashenko, things are complicated, which I love. And saying things about books that are this complex in a way is challenging. And I like a challenge, but I found this book extraordinary because of its register, and that's going to be its tone. It's almost like it's written in two parts, and I know she's doing it, at least that's my feeling, is she's doing it on purpose. She's luring you in with her first bit, so she lures you in with this comedy, with this contemporary Brisbane where you have this nearly 100-year-old woman, Eddie Blanket, who's falling over, and her whole thing is about, you know, where she is in relation to the land and the world she's in and her point of view. So as an opener, getting someone who's falling over because she's an Indigenous woman who's lived for years under another person's way of looking at the world, as in non-Indigenous people who live in Australia. She is hilariously funny. And I think the humour sort of settles us into this story, and we sort of think, this will be, it's vibrant, it's very trickstery. And I think that's a nod to some of this. I think that's a nod to Indigenous storytelling as well, where a story or a truth can be presented to you with this kind of artifice. She's terribly funny. And her granddaughter, Winona, is an absolute firebrand. Like, she is someone who lets no one away with anything. So this very strong activist character. And there's a young man in the hospital who thinks he might be Aboriginal, but he's not sure how Aboriginal. And Lucashenko skewers the white ally, the white, I think I might be Indigenous, and what it means to be coming up with this nonsense about percentages of blood and lineage and ancestry. And she's interested in how you live and how you open out to people who may or may not be like you. And she does that with tongue-in-cheek. But all of this is kind of an opening into telling you the story of Brisbane and how it was settled, colonised. And that's a very serious story. It's told from the point of view of a young saltwater man called Myfanwy, and he is, you know, things that I don't know and don't understand, but, you know, he sort of moves to away from his people, because he's been, you know, he's been co-opted by someone to help them with their English white people who are, you know, going to offer him an opportunity. Maybe he can make his money, and maybe he can own his own boat. And this is his life dream. He falls in love, and he watches with this incredible transparency, and you feel a kind of naivety that Lucashenko nails about, you know, the way the white man talked about owning the land. And for an Indigenous person, how can you own land? Because land is part of you. So she's all the time kind of pointing out ways of thinking in order to also, I suppose, to open up any reader to a way of looking at history and looking at the story of our land and, you know, the silliness of owning. I mean, and of not caring for it, and of imposing law and boundary and justice. And some of it wasn't very fair. And dreadful things happened. And she gives us enough of it. Nothing's terribly gory or gritty, but we grow up with Myfanwy, and we learn as we jog alongside him, we learn an awful lot about what went on. I think this is a heart-stoppingly good book. I really do. And it's an important book, but you will have a lot of fun with it because it's about story, it's about narrative, it's about what history is. But it's all done with a kind of deftness, not a nonchalance, because there's nothing about Lucashenko that is nonchalant. But she kind of throws it out there and hopes you're going to pick it up. And boy, oh boy, when you pick it up, you've got a lot to think about. Just thought it was a cracker. So there you are, 4 absolutely top-class Aussie reads. Have a lot of fun. Let me know how you go. If you like this video, you could think about liking and subscribing. That helps me. And I will talk to you again soon.